In New York, and our UN correspondent Sherwin Bryse Pease is having a debate now with the elders member Machel and the Secretary General of Amnesty International Kumi Naidoo. Let's take you live now to that discussion.
Society organization to participate in building peace. We participate as well as the elders because we know exactly to deal with the human healing. Governments alone cannot do it. That's why we offer, our contribution as well.
And let's also just take a moment to remember the late Kofi Annan, who was also an elder. We had a wonderful memorial service for him here. Our commiserations and sympathies to you as the elders. Kumi, let's bring you in here. Kumi just gave a very fiery speech as well, literally calling on the United States and the United States, China and Russia to join the International Criminal Court. I don't think we've heard countries identified in that manner, certainly not from the lectern in the General Assembly, so congratulations for that. You do talk a lot about political will, right? We talk about the rhetoric, but we don't see the action. We are missing political will in this conversation, and certainly in the actions we seek to change the societies we live in. What's your message to the summit?
First, if I can just say that following the comments of Mama Graca, I'm reminded of a moment during the liberation struggle in South Africa when you followed such wonderful comments. You started by saying, most of the really good points I wanted to make have been eloquently made by the previous speaker. And then you said, however, for emphasis, and then you spoke for like 1 hour. So
it's the tragedy of going second.
So I fully endorse all those comments. I think political will, thankfully, is a renewable resource. It can be generated by political activism, by people who stand up and be counted. And I am not pessimistic about how we can do that, because young people, I get my inspiration today from young people. Mama Graca's Trust had a wonderful gathering in Pretoria recently where we brought together African networks, and I was extremely inspired by what young people are saying, because young people recognize that the failure of current adult political leadership right now, they are going to pay the consequences. However, I think we have to call it as it is. There are certain leaders in our world of some of the most powerful nations, including the one that we're in right now, are pathetically failing us, are taking us back, are actually creating disillusionment. And I think that the urgency of the convergence of crisis that we're seeing, it's not just that it's one thing, it's not that just it's war, poverty, climate change, gender
it's
inequality.
Everything at once.
It's this convergence of crisis is creating a perfect storm, and I want to believe that more and more people, young and old, men and women, gay and straight, north and south, will see this moment as one where we have to get off our butts. We cannot continually say government is bad or the situation is bad and just leave it there. We have to actually start taking responsibility, and that is the goal of civil society.
But I think more broadly, when we have a discussion about the Sustainable Development Goals and how we hold our governments accountable, right? Because these treaties are domesticated in national law, and so at the end of the day, it takes the citizenry of national domiciles to hold politicians accountable. You cannot, as the United Nations, expect the Secretary General to hold the leader of South Sudan or the leader of whatever, United States accountable. It really does come down to citizen activism. And you talk about the youth, and that often is the largest segment of any population that doesn't turn up to the polls to vote. Is that something you can agree with?
I think it's in two ways. I will insist that those who are elected leaders, they have the moral imperative to do much more in terms of stopping conflict, one. Second, yesterday we met as advocates of Secretary General for the SDGs, and we realized that in many cases, countries, people do not even know what SDGs are. What does it mean? That you had heads of states who have, adopted.
Sure.
You need to have the teams, ministers, to go back and engage citizens and to say, this is what we commit as a nation to implement for the next 30 years. it is also true that we have part of responsibility as civil society organizations to make the SDGs known. But for citizens to hold their countries, I mean, the leaders accountable, they need to know exactly what has been committed for the next, now not 15, they are 12 years. And that this communication between the elected leadership and the citizenry, I think it is something which has to be reinforced. Yes, young people will take responsibility. They have to take responsibility. And actually, if you allow me, I'm going now to raise one issue which has been worrying me, particularly after the passing of Kofi Annan. You know, we had a stellar leadership in people like Nelson Mandela. Desmond Tutu is still with us, but he's frail. President Carter, he's still with us, but he's frail.
Right.
And now we lost Kofi. So the big trees
have fallen.
The big trees are falling. So here it's time to say, stand, be counted, and take really the first line of leadership. So I agree with you, with the Kumi, that young people have to do, but they have to make themselves available to stand and be counted in numbers.
I won't lie, I got a little depressed there. But your message is pick yourself up and get back up, right?
I think we have no choice, because if this young leadership doesn't emerge,
right,
as Kumi is saying, I do not have much faith in some of the people who are sitting that side, because they've proven that they are not committed enough. We need other kind of leadership which really is committed for transformation.
I do hope they're watching, Mrs. Machel. I really do.
I hope they are, and I'm saying this because I'm not a diplomat, and at this age, I really worry about the future of those generations who are all my grandchildren.
As a journalist, we really enjoy the undiplomatic types in the room. Kumi, I just wanted to touch on, before I get to some of the elder initiatives, Mrs. Machel, I wanted to talk about the political declaration. It's a really comprehensive document, but two things I don't find in that declaration are the words Security Council and reform.
Yes. And this is a problem.
And I get, the South Africans have told me, well, they didn't really, they wanted to get everybody to coalesce around this agreement. Because I asked the foreign minister, I said, well, these are two pivotal institutions that really do kind of make or break whether we have peace and security in the world. And they're not mentioned in this document. And they said, well, we wanted to get everyone around the table to agree.
Well, you know, Kofi Annan, when he used to very honestly say, because I used to sometimes challenge him as a civil society leader, and you say, I totally agree that the United Nations is stuck in the geopolitics of 1945. I mean, we have to have fundamental reform of the Security Council. I mean, just think about it, right? Why should the UK and France have a veto? Because in 1945, they were colonial hegemons that control large parts of the world, but population size-wise, they should not be there. Oh, then if you say, well, okay, they are there because of holding nuclear weapons, because they have weapons of mass destruction and that's why they qualify, then you need to have Pakistan, India, Israel, and so on there as well. So I think what we need is also to get away from the veto situation. And in the short term, I would say we have to find a way in which countries do not, even though they have the veto, they need to be prevented from exercising it, especially when large numbers of people's lives are at stake. And we need to use the General Assembly as a way to actually balance that power. And unfortunately, that can only happen if there's political will in those countries that have that power already.
Intergovernmental negotiations have been ongoing since 2007. The first resolution to be introduced was in 1993, before Nelson Mandela became president, that began this discussion. So we've been talking about it for almost a quarter of a century, which is ridiculous.
It's precisely what I wanted to come and say. That architecture was established as a response to the two
world wars.
Yeah.
Right.
The point I'm making is really to question, does that architecture still serve us 70 years later? And we have to dismantle it because it proves it's not going to continue to serve the interests of transformation of society, in which democratization of society has taken place. It doesn't work anymore. So when we appeal to our leaders elected, is that they have to use the power which has been given to them by the billions of people. And that's what they forget. And I think Kumi made a big point. It is the people who should count here. It is not the small number of people who are sitting there. It's to say, what is the interest of the billions of people? And in that sense, it doesn't matter whether my country has 20 million and another one will have 30 million. It's the mandate which was given to my leader. I mean, to say, here, we need to transform. Institutions established.
All right, well, there you have it. That is U.S. correspondent Sherwin Bryse Pease, of course, having a debate, or rather a conversation with the elders eminent member, Machel, and the Secretary General of Amnesty International, Kumi, Naidoo, taking a look at a variety of issues. All right, we're taking a quick break here on Your Story. When we come back, Peter will continue his conversation with Dr. Matwale Mutsecha, looking at Heritage Day. Don't go.